The birth of Moses, Exodus 1:8-2:10. Welcome to Bible Story Time today. We're delving into the incredible story of Moses' birth, how God had a plan for him even before he was born, and how this story reflects his faithfulness to his people. Stay with us till the end as we explore how God's timing and provision work in mysterious and powerful ways. The situation in Egypt. The story of Moses begins during a time of great suffering for the Israelites. After the death of Joseph and his brothers, a new Pharaoh came to power in Egypt who did not know Joseph. He saw the growing number of Israelites and feared they might become too powerful, so he enslaved them. For years, the Israelites lived under cruel oppression, working tirelessly in the harsh conditions of Egypt. Pharaoh, feeling threatened by the Israelites' population growth, devised a brutal plan to control them. He ordered that every newborn Hebrew boy be thrown into the Nile River, hoping to prevent the birth of any future leaders who might rise up and challenge his rule. The situation seemed bleak for the Israelites, but God's plan was already set in motion. The birth of Moses. During this time, a Hebrew woman from the tribe of Levi gave birth to a son. When she saw that he was a beautiful child, she was filled with love and fear. She could not bring herself to follow Pharaoh's command and kill her baby. Instead, she decided to hide him for as long as possible. For 3 months, she kept her son hidden from the Egyptian authorities, but as he grew older, it became harder to keep him hidden. At this point, Moses' mother had to make a difficult decision. Trusting in God, she made a basket out of papyrus reeds, coated it with tar and pitch, and placed her baby boy inside. She then gently set the basket among the reeds along the Nile River, hoping and praying that God would protect him. The providence of God. Little did she know that God had already orchestrated a plan for her son's safety. As the basket floated down the river, Pharaoh's daughter came to bathe at the Nile's edge. When she saw the basket, she had her servants retrieve it. Opening the basket, she saw the baby and immediately recognized that he was one of the Hebrew children. Despite knowing that the baby's life had been spared in defiance of her father's decree, Pharaoh's daughter felt compassion for him. Moses' sister, who had been watching from a distance, stepped forward and offered to find a Hebrew woman to nurse the child. Pharaoh's daughter agreed, and Moses' own mother was brought to care for him. Moses is raised in Pharaoh's household. Moses' mother was able to nurse and raise her son for a time, but once he was older, she had to return him to Pharaoh's daughter. Moses was raised in Pharaoh's palace, where he was educated and lived as an Egyptian prince. Although Moses grew up with privilege, he was still a Hebrew by birth and was raised in the knowledge of the God of his ancestors. God had a purpose for Moses, and he was preparing him for a role far greater than being a prince in Pharaoh's court. Though Moses didn't realize it at the time, God was shaping him for leadership, and his plans for Moses would unfold in ways that were beyond human understanding. The call of Moses and God's timing. Moses' story takes an interesting turn when, as an adult, he witnessed an Egyptian taskmaster beating a Hebrew slave, Moses, in a moment of anger and compassion, killed the Egyptian, and hid his body in the sand. When he realized that his act had been discovered, Moses fled to the land of Midian to escape Pharaoh's wrath. For 40 years, Moses lived as a shepherd in Midian. During this time, God was continuing to shape his character and teach him humility. While Moses might have felt forgotten, God was preparing him for the monumental task of leading the Israelites out of slavery in Egypt. It was in God's perfect timing that he would appear to Moses in a burning bush and call him to deliver the Israelites. The significance of Moses' birth. Moses' birth and early years remind us of God's sovereign plan and his faithfulness even in the midst of difficult circumstances when Pharaoh thought he could destroy the Israelites by killing their children. God was already making provisions for the future deliverer of his people. His timing was perfect, and his protection was evident in every detail of the story. Lessons from Moses' birth. The birth of Moses teaches us several important lessons. God has a plan for every life. Just as God had a purpose for Moses even before he was born, he has a plan for each of us. No matter what challenges or opposition we may face, God's plan will always prevail. Trust in God's timing. Moses' mother had to trust that God would protect her son when she placed him in the basket. Even though she could not see the outcome, she trusted that God would be faithful to keep her son safe. Sometimes we must step out in faith and trust in God's perfect timing. God uses ordinary people for extraordinary purposes. Moses' mother was an ordinary woman, yet God used her actions to set the stage for the deliverance of his people. Never underestimate how God can use you in his plans. God is always working behind the scenes. Even when it seemed like the Israelites were defeated and oppressed, God was at work behind the scenes preparing for their rescue. We might not always see God's work in the moment, but he is always working on our behalf. Moses' birth is a reminder that God is always working in our lives even when we cannot see it. If you've been facing challenges or wondering if God has a plan for you, take heart just like Moses. Your story is part of a bigger picture. If you were inspired by this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Bible Story Time. Stay tuned for the next video, where we'll dive into the story of Moses and the burning bush, an unforgettable encounter with God.